Did you see a big red thing at the top of the screen that says recording?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So if you haven't, thank you for joining us. If you haven't, please click on a mute on your microphone, and then when you're ready to talk, you can unmute it. I'm hearing like a dripping sound.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's no problem. It's literally no problem. So, energetically, it feels like there's this word that keeps coming up, and it's uncertainty. Uncertainty about these times, uncertainty about what am I going to do, what's going to happen, uncertainty about I think I think I had an awakening. Am I awake? I don't. And then it went away. What do I do? And maybe I need to ask another question, watch another video, check out another book. And uncertainty is the mind's ace in the hole. It's so good at what it does to lob problems, challenges, even good things in a direction so that it can have this relevance, this thing to solve. And uncertainty is all it can be its go-to when there's nothing else. But if you look at that and you start to look logically at what uncertainty means, then you're comparing it to what? To 3 months ago, 4 months ago, when you were certain that this wouldn't happen. The uncertainty is always the case. This is life in free fall. This is what is always certain, but the content of the mind will try to drum up things that need to be solved by creating these elements of uncertainty. I use if you've heard any of the talks, I think there's a common theme, which is let's watch Noel trip over his own words to try to describe what is. and so that does happen, but there's this element of you can't, it's a deeper than knowing. It's a deeper than, because it's not a knowing in terms of logic or intellect, but with an instinctual understanding of knowing being. Uncertainty is the default setting, because what this is just a beautiful mystery to pretend that we actually know what's going on, or that we actually know what is going to happen. Is it's folly. It's folly. And sometimes it doesn't mean that can't create anxious thoughts, that there isn't stress or tension felt in the body. But those are thoughts arising. That's just more tools of the mind or of ego. And so if these uncertain thoughts are coming up, then there's always the pointer, there's always the I don't want to say, command, but there's always an opportunity to look and see where those thoughts are arising. And that doesn't mean just bad thoughts. That doesn't mean, thoughts that I don't want to have, like out with the bad, in with the good. How do I get those? It means all of them. Look at the source of all of them, even the good thoughts. In that context, they're all on the same side of the table. It's good and bad are just labels. But when it comes to the infinite, when it comes to what is, there is no good or bad. There's just simply this. Talking happening, walking happening, drinking tea happening. It's all just happening, but not by anyone. It's this element of non-doership is always there, and yet it's understood. It feels real. It feels real. This programming has been running for so long that of course it feels real. It's not only the programs and the patterns have been running, but they've been reinforced over and over and over again. And so the seeking happens, the search for something external, objects. And when I say objects, I don't just mean things. I mean relationships, events, basically anything other than this, you could classify as an object. There's that search for wholeness through these objects. And then, we go through life, and then we discover non-duality, and we go, wow, that's the ultimate object. If I just figure that out, if I just figure out how to be awake, then I don't have to worry about all these other things. It's the ultimate goodie. And yet that too is on the same side of the table. Then it just becomes a seeking. Now, some might argue, well, that's a better thing to be pursuing than, the nonstop search for happiness in stuff. And I suppose you could argue that's the case, but seeking energy and looking for awakening does create a lot of frustration as well, because there's a wanting and a desire to get to that thing. And there's nothing wrong with seeking. I've said this before. I've said it to some of you directly. The call off the search pointer it's helpful in some regards, but it's a silly instruction, because you seek until you don't. We seek until we don't, until we figure it out. So it's not about calling off the search. It's not about trying to stop seeking. It's just, while this is happening, while we're looking for this, whatever it is, this gateless gate on this pathless path, at least here, there's always a suggestion to do whatever is possible to find peace and find the space of being, and use any of those thoughts arising as reminders, as pointers to come back to this. I'll pause here. Does anybody have any comments or questions? If you do, go ahead and unmute. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, is my picture coming, my face coming up, or just my avatar, the yin yang?
Just your digital avatar, not your meat one.
Oh, okay. Um, I wrote a whole bunch of them now. I had one that was more important than the others. Um, I actually have um, oh, start with the silly question. When you became fully through Gateless Gate awakened, did you ever have an urge to just tell everyone, "Hey, I'm enlightened now"? Fully have the Buddha mind, or was that just kind of like no interest because that would be
No, it wasn't. There was no interest in telling people I'm enlightened because that's not what it is.
yeah.
Yes. So, but there was a short period of time where I called it like the save the world phase, where I was just I couldn't believe it. You know, they say the literal translation of gospel is the good news. So
Hmm.
just hey, oh my gosh, guess what? You can get off your anxiety meds. You don't
Hmm.
exist anymore. There's no and it wasn't I wasn't shaking people. It wasn't anything like that. But there was buying a lot of books and um and then it was just seeing and that actually I later sort of looked at that as it was just sort of a form of oscillation.
Hmm.
Um there wasn't any sort of spiritual ego taking over, which I know can happen in certain on certain spiritual paths. It wasn't anything like that, like, oh bless you. In fact, there wasn't the oh bless you from me to anyone else. It was mostly anybody that I was trying to talk to non-duality about was patting me on the head and saying, and classifying it as a more power of positive thinking, because that was that the character of Noel, sort of a cheerleader of life, waking up every day feeling like that there was a self that needed to be improved upon, and we needed to jump out of bed and go do that. And yet there was, no matter what new step was taken, there was always that uh, there was always something missing. And so
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
oh,
no, I was gonna say there was always something that wasn't quite there. And I look at any practices, any practices that whether it's meditation or yoga or puzzles, anything, there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things, but they're all sort of half steps, half steps to the wall. You'll never really get to the wall with those activities. There will still be this feeling, um, this space that can't, this gap that can't be crossed when there's this belief system that there's a separate person. So I appreciate that question, because, and in fact, that's why the videos started getting made. That's why I started talking, because I was like, I got to talk about this. I live in a small town in Costa Rica. I don't, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna run out in the street corner with signs.
you
But really, it
can.
was just a sharing of this, so that conversations could start happening. And there was a lot of writing. But yeah, I would say it was about a month period of time where that save the world phase happened, and then and then it just sort of subsided, and it just doesn't exist. I don't. um, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm boring at parties, but I'm not talking about uh, I'm not talking about non-duality as party conversation.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to get a question off to get it going. But
Yeah.
the one thing, my real question, the one that for me personally is, I've gone through that phase of knowing what I am not. You know how you whittle down. I'm not this, I'm not that,
Hmm.
until you get to the end, which is nothing,
Hmm.
or the eternal, call it whatever you want. And now I'm sort of at that phase of, what kind of nothing am I? Or what is this nothing the examination of what I am, as I've gone through the phase of what I am not, and now I'm in the examination of, well, what am I? What kind of nothing is this?
Hmm.
Which,
That's possibly the mind just looking for an edge. I, not even
okay.
not even possibly. I would say that that's what it is. It's looking for what the mind. And by the way, the mind doesn't exist, but it's always good to have to offer these concessions so we can talk about this. But it's safe to say that the mind will always be at the very least, the ego, the mind, whatever you want to call it, will at the very least be waiting in the wings in this dormant place, ready to pounce. It doesn't go lightly, and in some cases, it doesn't. It really, really fights. But and even here, I've told the story of a couple of weeks ago. I was going to the grocery store and I was walking back, and all of a sudden I had this like welling up, this blissful experience was happening, and I'm like, whoa, okay, you know, I wasn't trying to make it happen, wasn't trying to sustain it, wasn't anything, but the mind was just sort of rifling through the database of why are we feeling this way? Is it this? Is it this? And it was just going, just thought, trying to associate some external thing for why this was happening. And I just let it run its course. And it finally, this thought arose, oh, as if like it gave up, like, oh, we don't do that anymore. Which is the strangest thing, like as if like, oh, hey, I get it. So like, I'm going to try to create some problems. I'm going to try to create some challenges, some things, and associate this impermanent thing to this, you know, to this experience, this apparent experience. And then it almost as if it wasn't trying to stir up trouble, it sort of came back and was like, oh no, we're good. We really got this thing figured out. Good job. You know? But that's okay. This isn't transcendence of the mind, of thoughts. It is the allowance of everything in the moment of what is to take place. And that includes thoughts of, I need to save everybody, I need to tell everybody about this. All of those are okay. They're all allowed. Everything is, because there isn't anything that this isn't.
Yeah, I understand. Well, that's good enough for me for now.
Okay.
Lots of other questions, but yeah, I mean, to be in a place of no desire whatsoever and the ultimate okayness is it,
Mm.
or at least a big part of it. But yeah, I'll let other people go now.
Yeah, the ultimate okayness is that such a great a great description of it, and and again, the video that I just did about, you know, wants and desires, the goal isn't desirelessness. It's just acceptance of the fact that desire thoughts or wanting thoughts also happen, and they're okay. um you know, I don't know when this happened, but what a an unbelievable amount of freedom to realize that every thought that arises doesn't need to be figured out or managed. I mean, how or reconciled, how much of our lives have been spent like, since I had a thought, it needs to be considered. It neither needs to be solved, or I need to figure it out, or why the hell would I think that? You know, like even if the thought appears bad, and and it's not something that you're gonna, you know, keep mulling over, the why did that thought come up, and the freedom from that is is the freedom of everything, because the mind it gets so used to calling the shots and running the show. Um, but sometimes sometimes in this really strange way you have to throw the mind food and use other thoughts to sort of deal with those, which is why I've talked about for a while I had this exercise that I would do called the invisible backpack. Or if a thought arose, I'd say, who are you and where did you come from? Which is just insanity if you think about it. A thought arising and then another thought going, who are you and where did you come from? But I found that through that exercise, I would turn the mind on itself. It would stun it for a moment, and I would have this peace. And then none of those exercises were required. Are useful. There's another theme that's not even now, just has been the case in conversations and sessions and answering questions, and I call it yeah but I get that, I get that we're all, that I'm not a separate person, that we're all one, but, and then the question comes in and negates everything beyond that. That's just more, those are just more thoughts arising. And when the mind, the ego, doesn't have anything to grasp onto, it will go quiet for a little bit. It doesn't mean that thoughts will necessarily stop, but I use this sort of like, I don't know, like a spiraling down of the noise of the content of the mind. And it doesn't mean that once it spirals down that it necessarily stays there, but it's as if there's this sort of loving roommate that you can't, that might be paying your rent, so or you're related to, so you can't kick them out, you can't leave, you just got to kind of tolerate them or her. That you just sort of get used to. And so it doesn't necessarily go away. Its volume lowers. Emerson, you have a question?
Yeah. The question is, when we first talked, there was an oscillation happening. And I think this is really helpful for everybody. What would be the signs that you're oscillating? That I got it, I don't have it. Am I in it? Am I not in it? It's kind of like the that seeking and not seeking oscillation.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would say the key indicator that it's happening is where a thought will arise that there's a feeling of not it, and there's still this belief system associated with it, so and that kind of also comes in this element of uncertainty, or doubt of like, oh, I had this experience, I had this opening and this clarity for a certain amount of time, and then it sort of went away. It's not to say that that's necessarily oscillation, but when there is this when it's known, and then other thoughts are arising and sort of trying to create this sort of, well, maybe I don't know, I mean, to be honest, so many of the conversations I have are about people just, I guess, not necessarily needing a reassurance, but just wanting someone else to talk to, that what they're feeling is okay. that go like, and I don't know where that comes from. It might be from expectations of what happens, of what happens afterwards. Well, that felt great, and now it's gone, and I'm not floating above the earth, and I still have this problem, arising and coming up. But if you want to look at it in the context of oscillation, and there's different metaphors that are used. I don't know, I can't remember who it is, but use the metaphor of like, after this sort of awakening thing happens, then the fan sort of, when you turn a fan off, it continues to spin for a while, and it goes. For me, energetically, it just feels like the oscillation will sort of happen, and then it gets slower and slower, but there's never any expectation that or interest that sometime in the play of life that I won't get caught up in the character of Noel. I mean, that's totally allowed. It's fun. It's fun playing the character, and sometimes it seems super believable, like it seems really real, and yet there's almost like a ceiling on that belief system that is no longer broken through. It never gets past that point, but it doesn't mean that there aren't thoughts arise of I mean, the mind is, it's so good this way. Like, maybe I don't have enough information about this. Maybe we need to do more. Like, I've said this before. Like, I don't even know why the videos get made. I was sitting there this morning, and I'm thinking about this, and it's so amazing to see all of you, and I'm so appreciative of everyone showing up for each other. And I'm just like, and this thought arises, like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? No stress of like, if no one shows up, like, it's nothing about that. It was just like, why is this happening? But then it's like, oh yeah, that's just a thought trying to like, there's no answer, there's no resolution to why questions. It's whys all the way down. And if you need confirmation of that, you could ask my son about kittens. It's just why, any interested child will just keep asking, they'll keep going down with the whys. Well, why is this? Why is this? Why is this? And there's never, the ultimate answer to the why questions is always ultimately just because there is no greater answer.
And then when you get that why, and then you're like, what now? What's next?
Yeah.
I think mind always goes that way.
Yeah. And so, and Barbara, I want to get to you in a second. I want to also say, yeah, no worries. When I was talking about uncertainty, one of the things that I think is interesting is that these expectations will be created of, if I just have this, this, and this, and this, then if-then statements, then everything will be just fine. And then you get there, every box checked, perfect. It's never exactly how we think it's going to be anyway. But let's say you check all those boxes, and then the mind goes, nicely done. Oh shit! How are we going to maintain this? How are we going to maintain this perfection that we've now created? And so the uncertainty never ends. The thoughts will, if they're believed, and the duality and the element of personhood, if it's believed, it will just keep kicking the can down the road and moving the goalpost. And I try not to tell people what to do, but don't believe it. Like, you can witness it, you can observe it, and you don't need to call it a liar, and you don't need to make it an enemy. But you can you can witness and observe it for what it is, which is it's not you are before and prior to and deeper than your thoughts and feelings. Those things happen, but what everybody here is the infinite. You weren't born and you don't die, and our true nature is reality. Everything else is content. Everything else is an object that comes and goes. Barbara, sorry about that.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here, and yeah, thank you so much, Noel. And it just brought up a few things for me, and that was, with the why question, it always comes back to why not? Why not in this crazy, wild aliveness, spontaneously arising thing or whatever it is, or no thing? And as for oscillation, I found for me that it was very much a case of knowing who I was, at center, or realizing or recognizing that I was the space for everything that was, arising, and being okay with that, and then coming back out there. So I was going in to who I was, then back out there into sort of the world of objects, then coming back. And I always knew when I was oscillating is when I was just not okay with what was happening right now. There was too much future. There was too much fear and future about what was going on. And then I knew then that it was just that I don't think you ever lose touch. You never lose it. When you recognize who you truly are, you know that. But sometimes you need the reminder. This is why we carry on. This is why we do this, why we read the books, why we love still the YouTube videos, and we still love everything. We love that because we love coming home. We love touching base, because for me, I had to go in and then come out again. I have to live in this world. Like I said, you live in it, you live in it, but you're not of it. You be in it, but you're not of it as such. For me, there's a feeling of being the space for all of this, but also sensing very much so through the senses that, if I cut myself, I bleed. But who's the I? Who's the I? Realizing, I mean, I nearly fainted. I might have told you when we spoke that when I first heard that I was not the doer, and the reason being is there is no separate entity, so how can I possibly be the doer? I nearly fainted. I nearly literally passed out to be told I was not the doer. And I believed it because everything told me, everything made sense from that moment. It was quite obvious that I was not the doer. I didn't ask for my parents. They didn't ask for theirs. I didn't ask for this. I've asked for nothing. It's all spontaneously arising through DNA and up-to-date conditioning, which includes this very second. Everything is a constant flow, an impersonal flow. And to me, it's impersonal. So not to take it personally, and I need the reminder. I think we just do, like you say, because of the ingrained notion that we are doing this, that it's not one impersonal flow is very ingrained. But, you come back to it more and more and more. You keep coming back, And for the idea for me years ago was for it to be a desireless state, I now realize is absolutely impossible. It is more of an acceptance. Samadhi, a desireless state. That's not living a full life as the relative and the absolute together as one. That's not whole to me. To me, relative and absolute are one, the whole. There's no separation. So it's this and that, this and that, and then this and that is. So thank you.
Yeah, beautifully stated. Thank you. And that reminds me of there's always a hesitation to talk about phases or stations or levels, because that's not really what it is, and yet it can also be kind of useful. But that's why I sort of put this flavor of non-duality in what I would call integration, because you'll hear people say like, oh, I totally get I totally get what's, it makes sense, and then but now how do I deal with all these people? How do I deal with all these people in the world? And that there is a and Barbara said so well said. I mean, this coming back to, and there can be a lot of fear with starting to see some of those feelings arising even post awakening, like oh no, if I hang out here, with this person or these group of people or these situations, then I'm gonna lose it. It's gonna be gone. And over time, with, I don't want to say with more practice, but just with more focus on it, there's more acceptance of those things, and you're not you're not in a situation where those thoughts arising have so much stickiness that they cause so much tension. So thank you, Barbara. That was awesome, and I enjoyed our conversation a lot. I enjoy all the conversations, and I'm always appreciative of everyone's time when we talk. Yeah, Mike or Michael.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to, not to belabor the oscillation thing, but what really helped me was when I heard that the absolute is not a feeling. Like the body will respond with blissful, peaceful feelings sometimes, but it's not a feeling. And so once I was able to internalize that and sense that, oh, yes, that's true. It's just a shift in perception. Then from a person seeing things to seeing the awareness, had no feeling to it whatsoever. Then there was the realization, and like it's always here. There's no way that it's not here. And to a certain degree, I was wanted to ask you about this whole idea of conviction. Nisargadatta Maharaj said, "My teacher told me that I am the Parabrahman, and I just believed him, and that was pretty much all I needed." And almost sounded like he just took it on faith. Who it was, without any real knowing of what absolute awareness was. And I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of conviction along with the direct experience that one might have.
Yeah.
That
Thank
might.
you for that. It's so there's a lot of people that love being told what to do. It's easy. The funny thing about it is they're sort of outsourcing having to take this idea of responsibility to a guru, in that particular context, or a teacher. And I don't use the term, I mean, for talking purposes I will, but I use the term speakers and authors, because I feel like the guru teacher thing just adds confusion to the whole thing. But the benefit of Nisargadatta Maharaj's belief in his teacher, in his guru, was that he was saying, I'm just going to trust this guy and move forward, and I believe everything that he says. And it gave him, in many ways, the freedom to be able to just proceed. That is not always the case. It's not the case for a lot of people. And I'll say all the time, I'm like, I'm not here to convince. There's so many times when the thought arises, just say, believe me, just trust me that this is the case. But then it always comes out like, don't believe me, don't trust me. Look for yourself. And I think that look for yourself is better, is is better advice, because humans, people, do stupid shit. You know, there's stuff going on even in the non-duality community that seems questionable. And yet these devotees, these individuals that want, you know, that want to give wholeheartedly to another person. I mean, I don't want to go off on this, but it's just a story. But I remember being like, I didn't know about non-duality when some of these openings happened. And when I found it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have found my thing. This is it. I'm going to become an expert at this. You know, I'm going to know everything about this. I'm going to have all the trading cards for all the teachers and gurus. And I even remember watching a Muji video and being like, there can't be any rock stars. There can't be any non-duality rock stars, because that goes against the teaching. There's no bigger, there's no higher than. And then, you know, cut to, I don't know, whenever it was, last year, a couple months ago, where you hear these like crazy things where people like, Muji's the second coming of the, you know, and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's happening, but what the hell? How can that be a thing? How can, you know, people like, he has a responsibility. It's like, well, you could say, well, that's just happening. But at the same time, I'm like, how can, I don't think it's an element of responsibility, but I'm like, how can, if someone says you're the second coming, why isn't there a correction there? Why isn't there I'm not your guru? If you're listening to what I'm saying, I'm not it. We're all it. I'm not it and you're not. That's not how this whole thing works. And yet people are, you know, humans can get caught up in things like money and power. And I mean, the irony is that someone who clearly understands what's going on around here, if the stories are to be believed, has fallen to energy, words, actions that are propping up the small self in this under the umbrella of the big S self, knowledge and awareness. I'm not calling it out as being wrong, but so to answer your question, Michael, the conviction doesn't come with more data. It doesn't come with more knowledge and more understanding and being able to answer or define the glossary of terms at the back of every non-duality book. It just ends up being the case where it can't be any other way. And in fact, it's not so much, or at least it wasn't. I mean, I suppose it can be, but pretty consistently the stories go that these things, it's sort of a peeling away, that it happens in these little, in a healthy manner, rather than like this rain down of angels and trumpets and kundalini experiences. And, you know, because then, you know, what do you do? What do you do with that? Especially if that ends up being, if that's the experience, then there might be expectations coming beyond, well, that fell away. And so how do I make that happen again? Or in the case of one of my friends, how do I never make that happen ever again, ever? And so he doesn't trust any of this from many years ago, because things hit him so hard that it just created a bunch of fear. And so he still talks about it. The conviction it's not from logic. It's, you know, it's not from the intellect. And it's not really an element of faith or a belief system or anything else, but it's the gentle persistence that it is, means that there is no interest to convince or convert or try to explain to someone how it is that they're wrong. I was talking, Emerson and I were talking about this the other day. If you're active on different times, different parts of social media about things, you know, lots of people don't like hearing about any of this. You know, it's a bunker bomb to lots of religions and religious upbringings and things like that. But someone comes up to me and says, if someone comes up to you or online and says, you know, I believe that reading the Bible 10 times a day, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm like, okay. I don't care to tell them otherwise. I don't even have the thought, you're wrong. I'm just like, isn't it amazing? Isn't it beautiful that consciousness has created this energetic contraction of this person that's so convinced that it's not it, that it believes in this other thing, outside of itself. I mean, it's not a choice. It's not a choice of perception in that context. But how amazing is it that exists, and to be able to look at that situation and from a place of true love, unconditional love, not in this spiritual ego hierarchy element, just true witnessing to the divine, to the infinite. And I'll have these thoughts arising, like I'll see something happening. I don't usually, sometimes I will get in trouble with it, but if I see a character in the world taking themselves really seriously, it's really hard for me to not start laughing. And the thought will arise, it's working. It's the trick, the hide and seek game is working so well there that this thing seems really serious. It seems super real over there. And yet laughter arises because not in this like sort of schadenfreude element of the folly of their efforts, but mostly because it's just seen for what it is. And it's easy for me to say that when I'm talking about someone else, but if you live with that person or you have to deal with that person on a regular basis, sometimes it's not funny. Sometimes it's, it can be frustrating as hell. I know someone else wanted to ask a question or started to. Is that you, Stephen? Or Steve? Oh, hang on, let me unmute you. All right, there you go.
Okay. I'm just finding out how to work my iPad. I've only had it 5 years.
Oh, yeah. No worries.
Right. I'm going back before most of you were born, I think, in the mid-1980s. I'm sat in a hotel, very relaxed. There's an art exhibition on. My wife's walking around the art exhibition. I smoked and I had a pipe and a pint of Guinness, and I was just there. And all of a sudden, this peace came over me. I had no idea. And I was like, for 2 or 3 hours, I was in like no idea what had happened, just, oh, wonderful. No thoughts, just everything looked wonderful. And then it faded. We're trying to get it back everything. Only 40. Right. I'm going back really basic now, simplicity. Who I am, Stephen, is a thought, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But who believes it? Just conscious. So there's non-duality. There's only oneness.
Mm-hmm.
So oneness believes it's Stephen at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
Well, what's all the rest of oneness doing?
Yeah, so great question.
Yeah, go on. Sorry. Yeah.
No, please finish.
No, they say it's a contraction of the energy that's contracted into this body, and this character, Stephen, has arisen.
Yeah.
But is there technically nothing really we can do? It's just when it wakes up. Oh, I'm not that.
Yeah. That's basically it. If some will say, there are again, it can be helpful to offer these concessions and give
Yeah.
the creator, give God, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what
Yeah.
terms are used. Anthropomorphize it and say, okay, so in order for the infinite to know itself, it forgets itself and these energetic contractions of Noel and Stephen and Barbara and Emerson and everybody. And then it proceeds to then try to find itself again. So in that game, in that cosmic game of hide and seek, there are default settings that where there is a forgetting that oneness is there. And we're talking about the infinite. So there is an infinite number of ways that consciousness awakens to itself. There's no, and in fact, there is no way that there is an exact copy of how it works, of how it can be. So there is nothing that can be done, but all's not lost, because once this is known, then I suppose the best that you can do is just continue making for, I say, a better way, a more peaceful waiting room. So what's his name? Richard Sylvester calls it a jail. You're in jail and the door's open. And sometimes, and sometimes I think those things are helpful. Like a big hit over the head can be super useful, but a little more gentle approach is like you're sitting in the waiting room for your name to be called, and then when you pass through, you're like, this door was open the whole time, and on it says, "Come on in." Like, what the hell, and that's why you'll get people. That's why oftentimes it will be met with so much laughter and even tears. Is that, wow, it's been, and that was sort of here. It was wow, it's just been this way it's been this the whole time. It's been like this the whole time. Like, it was never not this, like, in the even in the I've used the metaphor looking for your glasses when they're on top of your head and being like, if only I have my glasses, I could find my glasses. Like, it's this weird sort of situation where you're like, and so there's nothing there's nothing can be done, and the rub in all of it is that when self-realization happens, it's just seeing that there was never ever anything ever to be done.
Well, going back to the 80s when it happened, I wasn't thinking anything spiritual at all. I was just sort of relaxing on a Sunday. It was thinking about, I've got work tomorrow, I'm in a drink. And when it all happened, there was nothing really. There was no internet or nothing. So I went to the library and I found this book on Zen Buddhism. It was by an English barrister, Christmas Humphreys. And he'd done a lot of judo and martial arts. But there was a lot of things that resonated, So I thought I'd take up a Kido because that was a way of reaching enlightenment. I got a lot of bruises. I didn't wake up.
Well,
so,
I'm glad you found the library.
In
the library, because before the internet, this was landing a lot of people in mental hospitals.
Yeah. There was nothing sort of. It's wonderful now. There's so much, with a lot of other teachers. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, good.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
No.
Yes,
Hi.
Lawrence.
Hi. just something that's just a quick question. Do you think that one's upbringing in some sense colours the experience that one has when one wakes up? Because you've only mentioned just once the word divine, and the experience of the divine presence, where that is all there is. Is it a colouring? Do you think, I'm saying I'm asking a question, but I kind of, as I'm asking the question, I'm just saying, well, the answer is there anyway in the question, insofar as in this story's experience of waking up, the divine nature is something that stays with this person that I think I am. The divinity, the love. Why do we have to introduce the mind and go on the search and come up with all the terms and everything else, when the reality of it is that there is no individual, that there is not this person that I think I am. It doesn't exist. The mind doesn't exist, just as you have said many times. It's a it's not even a non-entity, because there isn't an entity there. It is only the divine. I wonder how, I don't know how this all fits into I don't know how this all fits into the search. I mean, this story, this person that I think I am, goes on this search, and it gets to the point where it's just heard enough. It's heard enough. Enough is enough. At some point, it just has to stop and say, you know, do you really want to listen to another video? Do you really want to listen to someone else talking about it? The only reason I decided to join this, and the only reason I've been listening to you is you give me such joy. I listen to you and I think, oh, yeah. It's as you say, I mean, our interest is in acknowledging the truth, using these characters. But what is the purpose of it? What is the purpose of us sitting here and discussing it? And okay, we're with like-minded people who understand what we're talking about in the main, although each of us are perhaps introduce into the melting pot little facets of the truth, little sort of not the truth, but little sort of facets of it, little understandings of it. Well, yeah, I reached the point where I just don't understand. I don't understand why I'm even sitting here.
You arrived. Yeah, I don't know anything. Yeah, it's thank you, Lawrence. That was there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, you wouldn't believe what a great compliment it is to have people go, "You're just some dude," like yeah, some dude, not knowing anything about this. You know, to the question of upbringing. If you look at, and I say this a lot because I don't know if it's the best pointer, but it is super useful. All words, all descriptions are concepts. So there's all, and Nisargadatta Maharaj said, if it can be conceived or perceived, discard it. Meaning, if it can be conceived or perceived, it's not what you are. So there's a subtle, maybe it's not so subtle, it felt subtle to me, a subtle element of the way that he would speak and write, speak and then someone else would write, where he would get you to a certain place in understanding, like, okay, this element of consciousness, and then he would it would he'd push you back and be like, you're beyond, you're before all of these things. And so what you described, your upbringing, if you look at an experience, and I say experience, but it's not really a thing, but the space of being, there is no content there. There's no layer of explanation of what's going on. But the upbringing, the content that is around, it's maybe no surprise to anyone that some guy raised in the South as a Christian, his mystical experiences are rooted in elements and stories of Jesus and the Bible and things like that. So that content and the attempt to describe what is happening, describe that experience, the content is driving the content, the programming of upbringing of that particular form is what's driving the description. And to the point about the divine, I don't use the phrase a lot, but I use the phrase, I just try to use all the phrases so I don't have to use anyone specifically, but I love that word. I love the word divine, because there's such a heart-centered element to that world. And if I'm sitting on the couch and sitting, in the quiet space, divine energy is what starts welling up, and it just becomes these thoughts, in the attempt to explain it, it's just like, this is a miracle. This is a miracle. This is an absolute miracle happening. And then it just becomes gratitude, so much gratitude, and gratitude to or for something or what, it's not anything. So it just, you kind of get caught up in your own, phrasing. Probably no surprise that, and you may have heard this before, but there's quite a few that are like, I'm done with this. I'm over it, and we'll get away from it. And then, as the head in the tiger's mouth, it sort of kind of sticks around. It really, in many ways, the same way that the mind does, sort of sticks around, waiting dormant to pop up again. And there was a huge frustration point. I shared this story before, the huge frustration point of I felt like I'm someone who gets stuff. I'm someone who can figure out the things that they want to figure out. Why can I not? Why is this thing that they're talking about not understood? Clearly there's different ways of saying it, but there's this thread, there's this constant that's being described using different words, and some are using spirituality and some are using science, but they're all talking about the same thing. Why can I not figure it out? And to release that resistance, that tension, I basically had to make a deal with myself that I was better off now with at least the knowledge of this message, this teaching, or whatever you want to call it, of non-duality, than when I was the character that was thinking that let's be honest, I can say that thought that he needed to be better, but at the base point of feeling like you need to be better is that I'm not enough. And this is why I did one video on it, and I don't know if I'll ever do another video, maybe, but it definitely gets a lot of chatter, especially when I turn the video into an audio and put it on a meditation app. Law of attraction people don't want to hear that they're not able to control shit. It shakes the cage a little bit. But for me, the realization or at least I should say, the deal that was made, that I was better, that life seemed better than when I woke up every day feeling like I needed to do something to better myself. So much relaxation there. And yet I didn't stop reading. I didn't stop watching videos, listening to talks, but I certainly loosened my grip on the seeking wheel, the seeking steering wheel a little bit, to just let things play out. I don't know if I can't remember if you asked a question or said something specific, but but that's just sort of what came up after.
You know, it was kind of a little bit all over the place, and I think I mean, I acknowledge that in trying to put something, we're trying to put something into words which is beyond words. Okay, I can only really try and explain a bit more from the experience. Okay, we'll just say, so well, we all understand anyway that I might use the term I experience, but it's not really I who was so
Sure.
That's a problem. That's a problem with mind and how mind sees things as paradoxes. I mean, this was my big issue, very big issue in an awakening experience, which was very profound. Well, I'm saying it was profound. That's just
sure. It's a great story. There's a great story there.
You know, yeah, story. Let's just say it's a story, and looking at it, and understanding in the only way I could possibly understand the experience. One only knows, and one can only put words to it after the event, or after the apparent event, because the awakening happens in a timeless moment. There isn't anybody there. There's nobody there at that point. And then at some point during that period, or after that period, mind comes in, and it seems to have to put something into words. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know whether I'm really explaining this to you, Noel. I've got the feeling from listening to you that I really felt that I mean, everything you say, I don't have to question it. I just listen to everything you say and think, yeah. And there's nothing I disagree with. Nothing. I've got no sort of thing I can say to you, oh, I don't agree with you there, Noel, or, you know, I mean, that's the weird thing. Coming across you was really strange. But I don't know whether I can really explain because it's using words again.
Yeah.
And one gets tongue-tied because of using words and the mind, and when the whole thing is just beyond it. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, and to the point about the mind coming around, and wanting to attach meaning to any sort of opening or experience, the mind does that all the time. Like, and even, you know, to friends or comments that are like, you know, well, I'd like to see the science, but, you know, behind this idea of that we don't control our thoughts. Science research is showing that the thoughts arise, and then the mind runs around behind and was like, that was me. You know, I mean, researchers can predict when in advance, minutes in advance, when someone is going to push a button and which color they're going to push. And yet the mind runs around and takes credit, or takes credit for that particular thought or that action. And so it's no surprise that it would do the same when some sort of awakening or glimpse or opening happens as well, because that's just what it does. And I like that. I like that you agree with everything that I say, even though it's not a. There's no convincing, you know. It's I have to be careful sometimes, because I will. Oftentimes, I had to. For the longest time, I was this like law of attraction person. I felt like not a law of attraction person, but I felt like there was this, visualization. I need to speak the right way. And so I'd trip over my words to use positive words and, say want and not need. Don't use the word I need something. Say I want something. And I actually just talked about this. Then I realized that that's all the same trick. Want is just a softer version of the energy that comes with needing. And yet, it's none of it is ever none of it's ever a problem. There's even sometimes the thoughts will arise. Like this is so silly, but thoughts will arise. Been riding my bike to work, and there's an animal that got an animal that got run over. It's just bones now. And I've been just riding. I ride home, and today I rode on the other side of it because there was a car coming, and the mind's like, "Whoa, what are we doing? That's not the path. Why'd you go on the left side?" And it's just starting to do whatever it does, like, and in the past, and I just laugh. I'm like, "Oh, there you go again." But in the past, I may have turned around because I made some big deal about this happening. I've turned around and go back around it in the same way that you might accidentally walk under a ladder, and then, as if that has anything to do with anything. But superstition and this element of visualization, and if I'm losing some people in this concept of visualization, because I have a friend who I talk about these things, and he's like, well, we do manifest our reality. We do manifest our reality. And I don't try to get into I don't get into philosophical debates with anybody. Because it's not of interest. But I'll say, okay, but it's reality. It just is this element of manifestation, of maker and made. It's just another edge that the mind wants, and wants to attach this meaning to, and wants to put something to. But it's always in the pursuit of it's always in the pursuit of something other than this. So even when and back to Lawrence, what you said about our upbringing and the content that comes up, the paying attention of what's happening, like sitting here and feeling in this space of being, is without language. It's without description. And yet the love for it is why talking, writing, sharing this happens. There's no other explanation for it. But it's no more or less important than washing your hands right now, or staying indoors, or doing all those things. It's just another thing happening. That doesn't mean that thoughts won't arise and the mind won't try to label or categorize or attach meaning to it. And it's tricky. I've said it's really good at what it does. So even if it's a subtle thing, if it sees an edge, then that's its foot in the door, so to speak, to try to convince you that it's still relevant more than anything else. Barbara, you got something to say?
Sorry, I'm on my. Can you see me? I'm on my phone, so it's a little bit tricky, but I really felt Lawrence and what he was saying. And for me, it was, I felt the same. If I read one more time, I'm not the body, I'm not this, I'm not that, you know, and there's a very real sense that I am, you know, and that's the beauty of it, that there is that sense of being human, but what's running through the vehicle, if you like, is what we really are. You know, when everything else is removed, we are the consciousness running through the body. And that's the realization that it's not anything special. It's very, very ordinary. It's you can't explain it, but it's very ordinary. It's not special to be enlightened or realized. It's our true nature. It's who we are, and life puts that in place. Life puts us on the path or not, and it, you know, it makes it happen or not in its own time, because that's all there is, you know. And if you're doing this, then you're on the right path. If you're not doing it, you're on the right path. It's all just coming up as it is, and there's not really a lot to do but to relax and know that you're always doing the right thing. It also changed my concept on love, and this place of unconditional love is, it's all of it. You know, it's the murderer and Mother Teresa. It's the handicapped child, and, you know, to have a handicapped child, you also have to have a healthy child. It's the both, the yin and the yang in everything. Is the unconditional love, is all of it. And when there was an acceptance of that there's nothing really wrong inherently, even though it appears so. And it appears we are this body, and it's closer than close, because it's meant to be in this experience, in this manifestation, if you like, for want of a better word. We're meant to feel like we're in a body.
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to feel like this. We're meant to feel the senses. You know, that's how consciousness realizes itself, through the senses in this meat suit, if you like. But that's not who I am. It's like the analogy of having a car, but you're not the car. You know, having a body, but you're not the body. But the sense of it is very real.
It certainly is. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to ditto a lot of what I've heard Barbara say, because it's really been very true for me. But I also want to share something that I have found has really been beneficial for me personally. And that's when I've gotten carried away with the wise or the spiritual or wanting to know. I keep bringing myself back to this, just this, just this. And I really stress it with my brain. And I know I'm using my brain. I know I'm using my mental and blah, blah, blah. And I don't care. I just come right back to, this is my world. This is all I know right now is what I feel. I feel myself breathing. I feel my feet thumping the ground as I walk, or it just, because I find if I get too much into the whys, that's why I like what you said, why not? I switch. I just remember, whoa, like this morning I was walking and I started doing it. I started asking this why stuff. And all of a sudden there was a catch. It was like, it's like a mental trip. It's like the body tripping over something, but it's a mental trip. And it's like, oops, we're doing it again, chick. You really want to do this? God, no, I don't want to do this. I don't get anywhere with this. And coming back to, okay, so what are we going to do? Oh, where am I? I'm right here. I'm walking. I'm hearing a bird. And some of it sounds so ridiculous, but I'm so grateful for it, because in a big sense, it helps me get out of that the mind fuck, you know, that grabs me sometimes. And that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, it's it's no problem that the mind is being used in this capacity to sort of blunt itself. It's and that's where any arising, any element of resistance that comes up can always be a pointer to come back to this. I think I've joked, I got these tattoos years ago as reminders to I mean, it makes me crack up. I'm like, I got these tattoos to remind myself every time I look down to just pay attention to what is. And then you realize that, like, what a joke that the thing that actually was, that I actually felt it important enough to give myself ink on my wrists to remind me to find that place. I mean, it's there's no regrets of doing it, but that was just another tool, another trick along the way. Anything that can be done to bring that peace as the reminder, whether it's a thought arising, or a calendar, a calendar pop up, or ink on the wrist, or tying a bracelet. Do it. Fine. Go to that space. Have that reminder pop up, and at some point, maybe the love for finding the space just. And I always say maybe, but I can tell you that here the love for the love for the space of being is so much that there's a regular travel, a regular steps are made to go to that well. But it doesn't mean checking out of life. It doesn't mean that someone's waking me up an hour later and going, dad, it's time to eat, or that the phone's ringing off the hook and I'm sitting in this catatonic state. It's just it ends up being allowed for the character to play the role that it's playing in life, but the love for and even really get caught up in sometimes. I mean, it feels, sometimes it's really feels like this is a thing. But then being able to just come back and find peace and find the space. Barbara, I think you said earlier, you just go back and back and back, keep coming, keep returning. So any of those tools or tricks or techniques can be useful. I always have to say, with a caveat, I call them like thorn games or thorn exercises. You don't want to get too dependent upon it, but use it until you don't need to, because it certainly can't hurt. Stephen, I have you on mute, but I feel like you want to say something. Is that the case? No? Okay.
So did you say? Sorry, no.
Oh no, I just said I said I have you on mute, but there's a look in your face like you want to say something. If not,
no.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm listening.
All right. Cool. So we're at 1/2 past. Any more questions or comments? Mike, I know you said you had a whole bunch. Oh, Emerson, go ahead.
I used to go to tons of this Zoom videos with so many different teachers, and then the question that I always had, this is the time that I'm going to get enlightened. This is the time, every single time that I went to one of those teachers, and then when it happened, it's almost kind of like the question that people would ask me, my friends would ask me, it's like, how did you get there? How did you get there? Because I spent a lot of time of like reading like tons and tons of non-duality books. I became like a non-duality fanboy. But there's a friend of mine that watched a 10-minute video, and then he's never heard about spirituality. He's never, and then he just kind of like, I got it. The question is, I guess, it's like, how do we get there?
I'll go back to what I always say: earnestness. Just abiding in the self, just the and that's even that is a trap, because there are expectations that can be set. So if I abide in the self and I do self-inquiry for 5 hours a day, how many days do I got to do that before this pops, before I understand? But the reason I like earnestness in that is that it almost becomes a, I don't want to say devotional practice, but it can be a way of moving through and in this play of life, being okay with the fact that it's going to happen whenever it happens. And if it gets frustrating, and if there is I can't do this anymore, I'm going to quit, do that too. Yeah, but that's, I guess maybe that's the ultimate question. How do I make this happen? And the answer is, you don't. There's no you. There's no you that can make it happen. They say, no person ever becomes enlightened. I think it was Dogen that said, you may not necessarily be aware of your own enlightenment. Really a softer way to say it, which is interesting coming from Zen, usually a little more direct and harsh in the approach. But yeah, I'm even feeling like I need to give the disclaimer of saying earnestness is how you do it, but it's really just it's really just a way of saying keep seeking, keep asking, keep finding the source of thoughts. If you feel like reading a book, read a book. If you feel like listening to a talk, listen to a talk. If you feel like screwing that all and not doing any of it for a while, then do that also. I have one friend here that I talk to in person. And I talked to him yesterday, and he's like, man, sometimes I wish I didn't know this. I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, I get it. He's like, because it's just like things. He's like, it was kind of fun sometimes feeling like that there was something to get, or being excited about certain things, and and he's like, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand. Like, those thoughts can arise. I'm like, but they say nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. You'll hear people say that, and I'm like, but really, and he's like, yeah, I know. It's better. It's better than it was, but I can't even use the term better. But I just thought it was funny to hear a thought arise, with real conviction of like, sometimes I feel like it was better before, when there were more, when the highs were higher and the lows were lower. And I'm like, well, you're free to play that out as the character of you. You're free to get really bummed out by the content and the things that are happening in the world. You can always play along. He's like, yeah, you can, but not fully. It always kind of, it ends up like, at the beginning of college, you always kind of hit that ceiling with it. But what an amazing thing to know and understand that. Barbara, you said something earlier, like this feels real. This element of the body, like we feel human. We're supposed to, otherwise, why would we? And what an amazing thing that you can continue to play this character, to see what happens. Someone asked on a comment, they're like, what drives you to wake up and get out of bed every morning? And you can tell that word drive has some motivational phrasing to it. It's not like, how do you possibly get out of bed? The way that word was used. And I try to, in whatever ways possible, respond, to everyone, and try to respond to the question that they're asking, rather than being these sort of concessionless scenarios. Like, and I love, like, Jim Newman's is like, bah, 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 people walk up and he cuts their head off. People walk up and he cuts their head off, you know? But I was like, so I thought about it, and I was like, what is the drive? And I was like, if I had to give an answer, it would basically be because I just want to see what happens. I just want to see what happens today. And therein is the beauty of experiencing the mystery of life and what's going on here. Not to figure it out, not to conquer it, not to finally have all the information so that there is the complete understanding, but it's I just, you know, just wanting to see what happens moment to moment. I want to tell you all, thank you so much. There's just, I mean, I'm like gratitude for not only showing up, but asking the questions and being able to be a part of this little experiment. It's so good to see all of your faces. You know, when I thought about doing this and moving towards doing something like this, I didn't want it to be I don't have anything against this, but I didn't want it to be like a live stream of just my face with a bunch of people chatting questions. I've always felt more interested in elements of what I would just call sharing, you know, sharing the space. And so thank you for being here. If anyone has any other questions or comments, like bring them up now.
I think we all have. We'd like to all of us, I think, would like to thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
For sharing.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it again. So I'll do it. I'm going to just do it once a month, but the next one will be on the 17th. I'll send you the newsletter information. And again, just sort of in closing, if any questions, comments, anything arises, then shoot me a message. I'll also say I'm not doing any more of the free sessions to be able to have a little bit more time. But since we've talked here, you get a session. So if you don't want to talk, I'm cool with that. But if you want to sign up to talk again, then I've made space or I will make space for anyone that I've already spoken with. So, all right. Anything else? Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I will. I'm gonna take this recording. I need to figure out the best way to do it, but I will send everyone an email with it if you feel the need to revisit it. Otherwise, if I see you again, I'll see you again. If I hear from you again, I'll hear from you again. If I don't, any of those, in either of those capacities, then thank you so much for our interactions. All right. Have great days and great nights. Thank you.